If anyone has any prayer requests, put it in the comment section and I'll pray over it. This message is on Paul Part 5. I originally intended for this to be the last of the series, but then last night as I was going through it, I was like, there's no way I can fit this in one message. So there's going to be more parts to it. In Acts chapter 21, verse 3 and 4, Paul was warned not to go to Jerusalem. I'm going to read that. Now, when we had discovered Cyprus, we left it on the left hand and sailed into Syria and landed at Tyre. For there the ship was to unlade her burden. And finding disciples, we tarried there 7 days, who said to Paul through the Spirit that he should not go up to Jerusalem. I think Paul was disobedient when he went to Jerusalem. Later, Paul went to Caesarea, and after he had been there 7 days, Agabus came up, took Paul's belt, and tied his own hands and feet with it, and said, Thus says the Holy Ghost, so shall the Jews at Jerusalem bind the man that owneth this girdle, and shall deliver him into the hands of the Gentiles. At this point, the people that was there tried to talk Paul out of going to Jerusalem. But Paul replied, What mean ye to weep and break mine heart? For I am ready, not to be bound only, but also to die at Jerusalem, for the name of the Lord Jesus. Then they said, The Lord's will be done. Then Paul went to see James, and when he had saluted them, he declared particularly what things God had wrought among the Gentiles by his ministry. And when they heard it, they glorified the Lord and said unto him, Thou seest, brother, how many thousands of Jews there are which believe, and they are all zealous of the law. And they are informed of thee, that thou teachest all the Jews which are among the Gentiles to forsake Moses, saying that they ought not to circumcise their children, neither to walk after the customs. What is it therefore? The multitude must needs come together, for they will hear that thou art come. Do therefore this that we say to thee. We have 4 men which have a vow on them. Take and purify thyself with them, and be at charges with them, that they may shave their heads, and all may know that these things whereof they were informed concerning thee, nothing but that thou thyself also walkest orderly and keepest the law. As touching the Gentiles which believe, we have written, concluded that they observe no such thing, save only that they keep themselves from things offered to idols, and from blood, and from strangled, and from fornication. Then Paul took the men, and the next day, purifying himself with them, entered into the temple to signify the accomplishment of the days of purification, until that an offering should be offered for every one of them. And when the 7 days were almost ended, the Jews which were of Asia, when they saw him in the temple, stirred up all the people and laid hands on him, crying out, Men of Israel, help! This is the man that teacheth all men everywhere against the people and the law and this place. And further, brought Greeks also in the temple, and has polluted this holy place. For they had seen before with him in the city Trophimus, an Ephesian, whom they supposed Paul had brought into the temple. And all the city was moved, and the people ran together, and they took Paul and drew him out of the temple, and forthwith the doors were shut. And as they went about to kill him, tidings came unto the chief captain of the band that all Jerusalem was in an uproar, who immediately took soldiers and centurions and ran down unto them. And when they saw the chief captain of the soldiers, they left beating of Paul. Then the chief captain came near and took him and commanded him to be bound with 2 chains, and demanded who he was and what he had done. And some cried one thing, and some another, among the multitude. And when he could not know the certainty for the turmoil, he commanded him to be carried into the castle. Paul asked the chief captain for permission to speak to the people, and he gave him permission. Paul started addressing the people as men, brethren, and fathers, despite the fact that Jesus commanded to call no man father, which that can be found in Matthew 23, verse 9. I'm going to read what Paul says here. Acts chapter 22, starting at verse 1. Men, brethren and fathers, hear ye my defense, which I make now unto you. And when they heard that he spoke in the Hebrew tongue to them, they kept the more silence. And he says, I am verily a man which am a Jew, born in Tarsus, a city in Cilicia, yet brought up in this city, at the feet of Gamaliel, and taught according to the perfect manner of the law of the fathers, and was zealous toward God, as ye all are this day. And I persecuted this way unto the death, binding and delivering into prisons both men and women, as also the high priest does bear me witness, and all the escort of the elders, from whom I also I received letters unto the brethren, and went to Damascus to bring them which were there bound unto Jerusalem for to be punished. And as it came to pass, as I made my journey, and was come nigh unto Damascus, about noon, there suddenly shone from heaven a great light round about me. And I fell unto the ground, and heard a voice saying unto me, Saul, Saul, why persecutest thou me? And I answered, Who art thou, Lord? And he said unto me, I am Jesus of Nazareth, whom thou persecutest. And they that were with me saw indeed the light, and were afraid. But they heard not the voice of him that spoke to me. And I said, What shall I do, Lord? And the Lord said unto me, Arise, and go into Damascus. And there it shall be told thee of all things which are appointed for thee to do. And when I could not see for the glory of that light, being led by the hand of them that were with me, I came into Damascus. And one Ananias, a devout man according to the law, having a good report of all the Jews which dwell there, came unto me, and stood and said unto me, Brother Saul, receive thy sight. And the same hour I looked up upon him, and he said, The God of our fathers has chosen thee, that thou shouldest know his will, and see that just one, and shouldest hear the voice of his mouth. For thou shalt be his witness unto all men of what thou hast seen and heard. And now, why tarriest thou? Arise, and be baptized, and wash away thy sins, calling on the name of the Lord. And it came to pass that when I was come again to Jerusalem, even when I prayed in the temple, I was in a trance, and saw him saying unto me, Make haste, and get thee quickly out of Jerusalem, for they will not receive thy testimony concerning me. And I said, Lord, they know that I imprisoned and beat in every synagogue them that believed on thee. And when the blood of thy martyr Stephen was shed, I also was standing by and consenting unto his death, and kept the raiment of them that slew him. And he said unto me, Depart, for I will send thee far hence unto the Gentiles. Now this made them mad when they heard him say that, because they did not want to hear about the Gentiles coming to God. Okay, where was I? When they heard this, they said, Away with such a fellow from the earth, for it is not fit that he should live. The chief captain commanded him to be brought into the castle, and bade that he should be examined by scourging. That's going to beat him, that he might know wherefore they cried so against him. And as they bound him with thongs, Paul said unto the centurion that stood by, Is it lawful for you to scourge a man that is a Roman and uncondemned? When the centurion heard that, he went and told the chief captain, saying, Take heed what thou doest, for this man is a Roman. Then the chief captain came and said unto him, Tell me, art thou a Roman? He said, Yea. And the chief captain answered, A great sum attained I this freedom. And Paul said, But I was born free. Was free born. Then straightway they departed from him, which should have examined him. And the chief captain was also afraid, after he knew that he was a Roman, and because he had bound him. The next day, the chief captain took Paul to the temple to find out what they had against Paul. Paul stood before the Jewish court and said, Men and brethren, I have lived in all good conscience before God unto this day. And the high priest Ananias commanded them that stood by him to smite him on the mouth. Then said Paul unto him, God will smite thee, thou whited wall. For sittest thou to judge me after the law, and commandest me to be smitten contrary to the law? And they that stood by said, Revilest thou God's high priest? Paul told them he did not realize he was the high priest. There are a number of reasons Paul did not realize that he was the high priest. First, the high priest was not the same high priest they had the last time Paul was in Jerusalem. You have to remember, Paul had left Jerusalem years before. He stayed away from Jerusalem for a long time by this point. And they had changed high priest during that time period. Second, this may not have been a normal assembly. So the high priest may not have wore the normal clothing or sit in the normal position. Third, Paul most likely had bad eyesight by this time. Paul realized that part of them were Pharisees and part were Sadducees, and said, I love this part here. He said, Men and brethren, I'm a Pharisee, the son of a Pharisee. Of the hope and resurrection of the dead I'm called in question. And when he had so said, there arose a dissension between the Pharisees and the Sadducees. And the multitude was divided. For the Sadducees say that there is no resurrection, neither angels nor spirit. But the Pharisees confessed both. And there arose a great cry, and the scribes that were of the Pharisees' part arose and strove, saying, We find no evil in this man. But if a spirit or an angel has spoken to him, let us not fight against God. And when there arose a great dissension, the chief captain, fearing lest Paul should have been pulled in pieces of them, commanded the soldiers to go down and take him by force from among them, and to bring him into the castle. And the night following, the Lord stood by him, and said, Be of good cheer, Paul, for as thou hast testified of me in Jerusalem, so must thou bear witness also at Rome. More than 40 men took an oath not to eat or drink until they killed Paul, and had plans to kill him the next day. The chief captain found out about the plot and sent Paul to Governor Felix. I'm going to end part 5 with this.